The day I opened my mother's journal, I discovered something that made me question my entire life. At first, I thought it was just grief playing tricks on me, but by the time I reached the final pages, I realized there was a truth she had hidden for 46 years, and I was never supposed to find it. If you've ever lost someone and wondered what they never told you, stay with me. And tell me in the comments if you've ever uncovered something after a loved one passed that changed how you saw them forever. My mother died last fall quietly, in the same small suburban house where I grew up, the pale blue one at the end of Maple Street outside Columbus. The house smelled like old books and lemon cleaner for weeks after she was gone. I was 46, recently divorced, and living alone in a rented condo that never quite felt like home. My daughter Emily was in college 2 states away and rarely called unless she needed something. My job at the insurance office had turned into a quiet kind of exhaustion that followed me even into sleep. So when my mother passed, cleaning out her house became something more than a chore. It felt like the last thing tethering me to a life that used to make sense. Have you ever noticed how midlife sneaks up on you? One day you're building a life, and the next you're sorting through what's left of it. Mom kept everything. Receipts from the 1980s, birthday cards, old church bulletins, boxes of photographs with curled edges. I spent weeks going through closets and drawers, deciding what to keep and what to let go. Most evenings I'd sit on the living room floor surrounded by cardboard boxes until the quiet became unbearable. That house felt different without her. Smaller somehow, lonelier. But the journal didn't appear until the last week. It was hidden in the back of her bedroom closet, inside a shoebox beneath a stack of folded winter sweaters. A simple brown notebook. No label. No dates on the cover. I almost tossed it into the donation pile. And sometimes I wish I had. Have you ever found something you knew you probably shouldn't read, but read anyway? I opened it that night at the kitchen table where she'd spent decades drinking coffee every morning. The first pages were ordinary. Grocery lists, weather notes, short thoughts, cold morning, knees ache. Spoke to Carol after church. I miss him today. That line caught me. I miss him today. My father had died 15 years earlier from a stroke. She talked about him often, so it didn't seem unusual. Still, something about the way she wrote it felt different. Lonelier. More raw. But that wasn't the worst part. As the entries went on, they grew more personal. She wrote about being tired, about feeling invisible, about wondering whether she'd made the right choices. I stopped reading at one point and just sat there staring at the wall, because I recognized those thoughts. They sounded like mine. Have you ever realized you've slowly become your parent, without meaning to? Around midnight I found an entry dated March 12, 1979, years before I was born. Her handwriting looked younger somehow, sharper and more hurried. And that entry changed everything. It said, I saw Daniel today. He doesn't know. I don't think I'll ever tell him. I read it 3 times. Daniel wasn't my father. My father's name was Richard. I told myself it meant nothing. Maybe a cousin. Maybe a friend. But my hands had started shaking. I kept reading. And what I discovered next destroyed me. Another entry. He asked if the baby was Richard's. I told him yes. Couldn't breathe. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too quiet, too full of ghosts. Have you ever learned something about your family that made you feel like a stranger in your own life? I closed the journal and pushed it away. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. For 3 days I avoided the notebook sitting on the kitchen counter. But secrets have gravity. They pull you back. And eventually, I opened it again. The later entries were older, shakier. Written after my father died. Daniel came by the church today. He looks older. So do I. I wonder if he sees himself in her. Her. Not my name. Just her. That hurt more than I expected. Have you ever wondered if your parents carried regrets they never shared? By then I knew what the journal was suggesting. I just didn't want to believe it. That my father might not have been my father. And at 46 years old, I didn't know which answer would hurt more. I drove past the old church the next morning, sat in the parking lot, watched people go in and out, wondering if Daniel might still be alive. wondering if he even knew I existed. Would you want to know the truth, even if it broke something inside you? That evening I read the final pages. Her last entries, written just months before she died. The ink wavered like she'd struggled to hold the pen. And that's when everything changed. One entry stood alone on a single page. I should have told her years ago. The next page. Richard was the man who raised her. Then the last entry. The one I can't forget. But Daniel was the man who came back. I stared at those words until they blurred. Because suddenly memories started rearranging themselves. A man visiting on Sunday afternoons. Mom calling him an old friend. The way he'd looked at me sometimes, not distant, not polite. Familiar. Too familiar. And then I remembered his name. Daniel Harper. But the journal still had one folded piece of paper tucked into the back cover. My hands trembled as I opened it. It was a letter, never mailed, addressed simply, to my daughter. Not my name, just my daughter. And I wish I had never read it. She wrote that she had met Daniel before she met my father. That they were young, in love. But Daniel left town chasing work. She married Richard 6 months later. And a few months after that, she found out she was pregnant. She wrote she never knew for certain. But deep down, she believed Daniel was my father. I sat there shaking. 46 years of certainty. Gone. Have you ever felt your past shift beneath your feet? But the last paragraph broke me. Richard chose you every day. Daniel never knew how to stay. Blood matters less than love. I hope someday you'll understand why I kept this secret. I cried harder than I had at her funeral. Because suddenly I understood. She hadn't hidden the truth out of shame. She had protected something. Family. A man who loved me as his own. The next morning I drove to the cemetery. Sat beside my father's grave for nearly an hour. Cold wind across the grass. Leaves scraping the stones. And I realized something that finally brought me peace. Richard was my father. Not because of blood. Because of every bedtime story. Every school pickup. Every quiet sacrifice I never noticed. That's the part my mother wanted me to see. And maybe that's why I wish I hadn't opened the journal. Because now I know the truth she carried alone for decades. A truth heavy enough to follow me for the rest of my life. Sometimes I still think about Daniel. Wonder if he ever suspected. Wonder if I passed him in a grocery store without knowing. But some doors stay closed for a reason. And maybe midlife is learning which questions don't need answers. If you've ever uncovered a family secret that changed how you see your past, share your story below. You're not alone in carrying these things. And if you believe it's never too late to understand where we come from, consider subscribing for more stories like this.